Good morning and welcome to our Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Erin. I'm joining you today from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. I'm really excited to get to chat with all of you today all about baby sharks. So we're going to start out by learning a little bit more about sharks. Then we'll learn more about our baby sharks and talk a little bit about some of the current research that's happening here at the Aquarium of the Pacific while we're studying shark reproduction. So stick around. We do have an opportunity for you to answer, or for you to ask all sorts of questions. We're going to put that number up here on the bottom. If you'd like to text us this morning, it is Wednesday morning. You can text us right here, 562-286-1838. If you're watching this live, again, 562-286-1838. If you're watching this at another time, you're welcome to email us at live@lbaop.org, and we'll do our best to get back to your email within a couple of days. So thank you for joining us. Again, text us. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear all of your shark questions. We'd also love to hear all of your observations. So we're going to start out by looking here at Shark Lagoon. We've got lots of sharks swimming around Shark Lagoon this morning. This is a live view of our shark exhibit. So I want you to take a look at these sharks and see what is it that you notice about these sharks. What observations can you make? What do you notice about these sharks? I noticed first off, there are a couple of animals in here that are not sharks. We've got some bony fish swimming around here in the middle. But we've got a couple of sharks. We've got our gray reef shark, zebra shark. There's a few blacktip reef sharks swimming around. Oh, there's one right there. My favorite, our sandbar shark, is cruising around somewhere near the back, I think over here. So take a look at these sharks. What do you notice about these sharks? Now, I want you specifically to be thinking about what sorts of things do you see on these sharks? What adaptations do these sharks have that make them a shark? When you look at this and you know that's definitely a shark, what is it that you see that tells you that that's a shark? How do you know that this is a shark? What adaptations do you see? If you've got any ideas, go ahead and text us right here. If not, I'm going to go ahead and start seeing some of the observations that I have about these sharks. The first thing that I think a lot of people notice are those fins. So let's talk about those fins. They've got a couple different types of fins, and all of them are very important. So the first one that we all probably see is that dorsal fin. Now look at these sharks. Sharks are shaped kind of like a football, and so they have the tendency to spin while they're swimming through the water. So the dorsal fin helps them to stay balanced, to avoid that spinning. So it helps them to stay straight up and down while they're swimming through the water. So we can see that large dorsal fin. Now, we've all seen that front dorsal fin, but sharks also have a second dorsal fin. So they've got a second one. There, we just saw it on that blacktip reef shark swimming by. So they've got two dorsal fins. Now, for a lot of sharks, they'll have a tall front dorsal fin and then a shorter second dorsal fin, like we see on this gray reef shark. Look at that shorter second dorsal fin. Other types of sharks, like our zebra sharks, which are swimming around, might have two of the same size dorsal fins. So they'll have two that are equal in size. Now, when we're looking at these dorsal fins, we can learn a lot about their speed. So generally, if a shark has very tall dorsal fins, like our reef sharks, then they're going to be very fast-moving sharks. If they have a lower, smaller dorsal fin, they're usually a little bit slower moving. There's that blacktip reef shark just swam by again. Now, they have other fins as well, though. Remember, we talked about the dorsal fins. They also have their tail, or their caudal fin, and they move that tail side to side, and that's how they're able to move through the water. Now, here we can see these reef sharks in the back that are moving those tails side to side. That's how they get that forward movement. The last fins that we're going to talk about are the ones on their side. Those are their pectoral fins, and those are used for steering. So when you combine all of these fins, the dorsal fin for balance, the caudal fin for forward movement, and the pectoral fins for steering, that's how these sharks are able to move around. What other adaptations do you see that show you that these are sharks? What else do you notice? Let's see if any of them swim by. We can see what other adaptations we can see. I want to take a second. I see that we have a stingray on the move back here. Stingrays are close relatives of sharks, and that's because, wow, look at that beautiful stingray. That's our Reticulate Whip Ray. It's our largest fish at the aquarium. It was last weighed at 400 pounds, and that was a couple of years ago. Now, the main adaptation that sharks and stingrays share is their cartilaginous skeleton. So if you feel your nose, you feel how your nose is wiggly, your ears are kind of wiggly. That flexible material is cartilage. So instead of having a skeleton made out of bone, like we do or like these fish have, the sharks and stingrays have a skeleton made out of cartilage. So sharks and stingrays are indeed a type of fish, but they are a special group of fish called cartilaginous fish. Again, because of that cartilaginous skeleton, that really flexible material making up their skeleton. So when we talk about sharks, a lot of times we include stingrays in that group as well because they are close relatives. Now, what other things do we notice when we look at these sharks? We notice their fins. We learned about their cartilaginous skeleton. Any other observations? Feel free to text us if you've got any observations. Here's our Sandbar Shark. Look at that huge dorsal fin on that Sandbar Shark. Another thing that we might notice is their mouth or their teeth. So sharks have different types of teeth for feeding on different types of animals. So if we were to look at the teeth for all of these sharks, they would all look different. So some sharks will have large pointy teeth for feeding on fish. Other sharks will have small flat teeth for feeding on animals that live in shells. Here we have our blacktip reef shark showing us its white belly. That's another thing we see when we look at sharks, is we see that they often have something called counter shading, where they've got a lighter belly and darker along the top. That counter shading helps them to blend in when they're swimming through the water. So you can imagine, I've got a stuffed animal shark I'll grab right here. You can imagine if a shark was swimming up above and there was a predator looking at it from below, that white belly would blend in with all of the light coming in from the surface. Now, on the other hand, if the shark was swimming down near the seafloor and there was a predator looking down on it, the dark back would blend in with all the darkness below. So look at these animals swimming through this coral reef. Notice how many of these sharks have a light belly and a dark back. So they've got that counter shading. And that's not just found in sharks. Think of other animals in the ocean. We can see that counter shading on some of these bony fish here. We also see it on animals like penguins, animals like orcas and dolphins. We even see it on animals like birds that fly through the air. So we're able to see that counter shading in a lot of different animals. There's that beautiful look at our zebra shark here, swimming on past. All right, the last adaptation that I want to talk about is on the side of the sharks. What are these lines? Anyone know what these lines are? You might be saying gills. If you're saying gills, you are correct. Those are their gill slits. So they've got these slits on the side of their head that they use for breathing. So the way that the shark breathes is while it's swimming through the water, moving that caudal fin, while it's swimming through the water goes in through their mouth and then it passes out over their gills. And while it's passing over their gills, they're able to pull all that oxygen out of the water. So just like we use our lungs to remove oxygen from the air, sharks use their gills to remove oxygen from the water. So it helps them with breathing. Now, there's so much diversity when we're looking at different types of sharks and stingrays. In fact, there's over 1,200 different species of sharks and stingrays, and they live in all different habitats. They can be different sizes, different colors, different shapes. They eat different foods. They have different types of predators. So we're going to take a look at 2 different types of sharks that live here at the aquarium, and we're going to see how these sharks are different so that we can learn a little bit more about them. Awesome. So here, I'll step aside. We have our zebra shark here, and then we have our gray reef shark here. Now, these are both sharks. They both live in the same habitat, so they both live in coral reefs, but they have very, very different lifestyles. They have very different prey items, and they have a very different appearance. We'll go ahead and put that number back on the screen so that you can take a look. If you would like to share any of those differences, go ahead and text us here at this number. What differences do you see between our gray reef shark and our zebra shark? Now, I noticed probably the first most striking difference is that coloration. So we see that the gray reef shark has this really classic shark coloration. It's gray in color. It's all solid. We have that darker counter shading with the darker on the top, the lighter on the bottom. The zebra shark does have a lighter belly as well, but the top is kind of an orangey brown color, and it has spots. So that's something different. Now, you might be thinking, why do we call it a zebra shark if it has spots? I thought zebras had stripes. We will take a look later at their babies, but when they are babies, they have stripes. So as they grow, those stripes stretch into spots, and that's why it gets this name, zebra shark, is from their appearance as babies. So we notice the difference in their coloration. What other differences do we see? What else do you notice? I noticed it looks like their body shape is pretty different. They have just in general a different body shape. So we see first off that the zebra shark has these ridges. That's really important because the zebra shark, while they both live in coral reefs, the zebra shark spends a lot more time closer to the reef. In fact, the zebra shark will sometimes hide in the cracks and crevices of the reef, and those ridges kind of help to protect them and then also to help kind of wedge them into some of those cracks and crevices. The gray reef shark, while it lives on coral reefs, kind of will live up and above the coral reef instead of resting on or underneath that coral. They'll kind of swim up above that coral reef, which brings me to my next point, and that's the fact that the zebra shark has the ability to sit and rest on the sea floor. I think we have a video that shows how they're able to do this, but you can see they've got this little hole right behind their eye. That hole is called a spiracle, and that helps them for breathing. Remember when we were talking about our shark earlier? We learned how the shark has to swim in order to breathe because the water goes in through their mouth and then out over their gills. Now, there are some types of sharks, including zebra sharks, that have the ability to pump water through this hole called a spiracle, and they pump water in through that hole and then out over their gills. So that's how they're able to breathe even when they're sitting on the seafloor. So based on that spiracle and then these ridges here, we can assume that the zebra shark spends a lot more time resting on the floor of the coral reef. Let's take a look back at those two sharks. Now you'll see the gray reef shark does not have that spiracle. So the gray reef shark has to swim all the time in order to breathe, which adds to that fact that the gray reef shark spends a lot more time swimming through the open ocean. Any other differences that you see? Any other differences? Let's look at their mouth, the shape of their face. So we see that the gray reef shark has a pointed face. The mouth is on the bottom, and the gray reef shark actually has like small triangular teeth, whereas the zebra shark has a really blunt face, and it actually has these like tiny teeth. They kind of look like the hard side of Velcro. So they're like really, really teeny tiny teeth. And that's because the zebra shark will slurp up small food that lives on the seafloor. So things like very small fish, shrimp, that sort of thing. It kind of has this ability to do this like sucking motion where it kind of sucks up that food, and that's how it's able to eat. So they're eating different kinds of food. So they have different teeth, different mouth shapes that allow them to eat different kinds of food. Now, the last thing I want to look at, I don't know if we've got a picture that shows the zebra shark's body a little bit better, but the zebra shark has kind of two dorsal fins that are the same size. They're a little bit smaller, and they're a little bit like, I guess, floppier. They're a little bit less rigid. So look at this fin. This gray reef shark has a really sturdy, rigid, tall fin on their back, whereas the zebra shark has a much lower one. It kind of has this gradual slope, and it's just really a different shape. There you can kind of see it very good. So you can see there's that first dorsal fin. The second dorsal fin is a little bit larger, but again, it's still a little bit softer, kind of floppy and less rigid, and that's because they're not really built for speed. So the gray reef shark gets much, much faster, so it has that tall dorsal fin to provide that extra balance, whereas the zebra shark has these much lower dorsal fins because they don't need to have that balance quite as much because they're a lot slower. The last difference I want to look at, we'll see if we can find pictures of this, but check out their tails. So the gray reef shark has this really kind of distinctive fork V-shaped tail, And that's a really typical tail shape that we see in sharks that do a lot of swimming, fish that do a lot of swimming. You would see this in like tuna or jacks or a lot of open ocean sharks. That tail is built for speed. That's a fast moving tail. Versus the zebra shark, if we don't have a picture, we can also head to Shark Lagoon, see if we can see one swimming around. The zebra shark has this long sweeping tail. In fact, the tail can be as much as half of the body length, and that tail is built for cruising. It is not built for speed. So let's take a look at Shark Lagoon. We'll see if either of our zebra sharks swim by. Here's one right here. Take a look at this tail as it comes past the camera. Should be approaching the camera here in just a second. Look out for that tail. Look at that long sweeping tail. So again, these are two different sharks. They live in the same habitat, but they feed on different food. They live in different parts of the habitat. They survive in different ways. They swim in different ways. They breathe in different ways. So this just shows some of that diversity within the shark world. Now, they have one other difference that is really, really cool, and that's that they reproduce in different ways. So sharks, depending on their species, are able to reproduce in different ways. So some types of sharks, like the gray reef shark, will give live birth. So the babies will grow inside of the mother, and then they'll be born alive from the mother. Other types of sharks, like zebra sharks, lay eggs. So the mother will incubate the eggs, grow the eggs, and then they'll deposit the eggs on the reef, and the eggs will hatch on that reef a couple of months later. Depending on the species, it could be 4 months later, it could be 7 months later, just depends on the species. So again, depending on the type of species, sharks will reproduce in different ways. And let's think about why that might be. You can imagine if you were a shark like, let's say a white shark, a great white shark, you'd probably want to give live birth because you're going to spend most of your time out in the open ocean. You kind of visit coastal areas occasionally, but it's a lot easier for you to give live birth versus an animal like a zebra shark or a bamboo shark that spends most of their time really close to coral reefs. It's a lot easier for them to lay eggs. So depending on their lifestyle, that can impact how they have their babies. Whale sharks, for instance, will give live birth, although scientists don't really know that much about them. We're still learning more about whale shark babies. Now, regardless of how they reproduce, sharks don't provide any sort of maternal care for their babies. So as soon as the babies are born or hatch, the babies are on their own, and they're independent and able to swim on their own. And I think we've got some different baby pictures that we can check out to learn a little bit more about some of our baby sharks. But as soon as they're born, they'll be on their own. So this is a zebra shark. Again, look at that really distinctive tail. It's about half of their body size. And they've got these stripes. So as soon as this baby zebra shark hatches from its egg, it's going to be independent and on its own. But there are a couple of things that occur with their biology that allows them to be successful as babies, even though they don't have that care from their parents. So one of those things, we'll take a look at my document camera so we can see what the egg looks like. This is kind of an interesting egg. This is an egg from a horn shark. And it's really interesting. So it has this kind of corkscrew shape, and that's because horn sharks live in places like kelp forests. They live in areas, let's see if we can get this a little bit brighter. They live in kelp forests and areas with a lot of rocks. So what the mother will do is the mother actually wedges this egg into the cracks and the crevices of the rock. So that helps to make sure that the egg is going to hatch in a protected area, like a rocky reef, a kelp forest, an area where there's going to be a lot of protection. So this egg is not going to like float into the middle of the ocean, and we're not going to have baby sharks that are born in the middle of the ocean. They're going to be born in a protected area that has a lot of food sources for them. Another type of egg that we have here, this is a zebra shark, so the shark that we've been looking at quite a bit, and you'll see these long stringy pieces. Those are tendrils, and these tendrils are really, really sticky. So what the mother does is when she's laying that egg, she kind of wraps the tendrils around a rock or a piece of coral. That way this egg is going to hatch in that protected, safe area. So that's kind of the first thing that they do, is that they'll always make sure that their eggs are going to hatch or that they give birth in a protected area. One of those protected areas that we see are like our coastal areas, even places like estuaries have a lot of babies, especially like baby stingrays will be born in estuaries. They're going to be born in a protected, safe area that has fewer predators, lots of prey availability, so that the babies can be successful as soon as they're born, even without having that help from their parents. The other thing that they do is that sharks have a very large liver when they're born. So their liver can be as much as 30% of their whole body weight. That way it's kind of like an insurance policy. So they can get their energy from that liver for the first couple of days or even a week or two. They can kind of feed off of that liver while they're figuring out how to find their own food. So it gives them just a little bit of a insurance policy that they'll be able to survive even while they're still figuring out how to find food, because it might take them a little bit of time. So by making sure they're born in a safe place and by making sure they have that backup energy source of that really enlarged liver, they're able to make sure that the babies are successful. Now here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, we are helping baby sharks by studying their reproduction. So there's been a lot of really interesting work that's gone into shark reproduction, specifically for zebra sharks. So we'll go back to one of our zebra sharks. And that is the work that our veterinarian is doing. So our veterinarian is studying how sharks reproduce by doing an artificial insemination study. So they're basically trying to reproduce sharks like our zebra shark when the males and the females are in different areas. So the way that he does that is he takes a sample from the male and inserts it into the female, and then the female lays eggs. Now, we were the first aquarium in the United States to be able to successfully raise baby zebra sharks that were raised by artificial insemination. So we had 2 of those. It was a couple of years ago, but our vet just recently this summer published the methods for that, so that other facilities can take those methods and be able to raise their own zebra sharks that are born by artificial insemination. And the hope is that in the future, we might be able to apply these same methods to other types of sharks, so that we can have babies born for sharks that either we have only the female of that shark species, or for sharks that don't really reproduce in zoos and aquariums very well. So this is really groundbreaking research that's happening that can help out our sharks by being able to reproduce them in aquariums like our aquarium. We've got a couple of other baby shark pictures I want to check out, just because everyone loves getting to see baby sharks. So we'll take a look. Here's one of our baby Epilet Sharks. Epilet Sharks are another shark species that lays eggs. They're really similar to bamboo sharks. And bamboo sharks were actually the first shark eggs that our vet was working on for that artificial insemination study. The reasoning being that their reproduction is pretty fast, they reproduce pretty easily, so they were really easy to study, get those methods really in place, really learn a lot about their reproduction, and then apply it to the zebra shark, whose reproduction is a little bit more complicated. And like I said, the goal in the future would be to use that same information that we've learned to be able to figure out how we can do artificial insemination on sharks that give live birth. So sharks like maybe blacktip reef sharks or sand tiger sharks, or other sharks that are in aquariums that give live birth instead of laying eggs. Now, I want to go ahead and we're going to take a second to talk about a baby shark that lives here in Southern California. So we are very fortunate here that Southern California is a nursery for white sharks. So this is not a baby, don't worry, this is a mother. This is an adult white shark, and adult white sharks will actually come here to Southern California and have their babies. Remember how we talked about how sharks will use a safe space to have their babies? Southern California doesn't really have many predators for baby white sharks. And there's a lot of prey availability. So those babies love to eat things like small fish and stingrays and other animals that are common here in Southern California. So you may have heard of, in the past couple of summers, we've had more and more sightings of baby or juvenile white sharks in our areas. These are white sharks that are usually about 6 to 8 feet in length. And that's a really great success. So that's a good sign. What that means is that we've done a lot in the previous decades to protect our Southern California oceans. So things like protecting the water, protecting our air, protecting our fish species, having certain regulations on the types of fishing gear that can be used, protecting our marine mammals. All of this protection has spread to our oceans to create a healthy ocean that has allowed for the return of an apex predator. And that's how you can tell if our local oceans are healthy, is if our oceans can support a top predator like a white shark, then it means that we've cleaned up our oceans to the point where we can have this healthy and complete ecosystem. So it's actually a really great sign that we're seeing these juvenile white sharks in our areas. And again, remember we talked about how they use a safe space to have their babies. So the adults will come in, whether it's from Mexico or from up near San Francisco, Northern California, or even the open Pacific Ocean. They'll come to this area, they'll have their babies, they'll give live birth to their babies, and then the mothers leave this area and go to other areas to feed. And it's just those juveniles that will spend a part of their life here, and then they'll move on as they get bigger. They'll move on to those other adult aggregating sites like San Francisco, like Mexico, like the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and they'll spend those times in those big open ocean areas. So it's really exciting to get to see these babies using this nursery space as it's supposed to be. Now, we talked about stingrays and how they use our local nurseries as well. I think we've got a couple pictures of baby stingrays that I always love to see while we're talking about baby sharks. This is a Juvenile Cow Nose Ray. So this is a species that's more tropical. So while we wouldn't see this species here in Southern California, this is a species that can be found in warmer water areas. Now, stingrays will all be born by live birth. So they are not going to be born from an egg the way that some sharks are. They are all born alive, and they come out kind of wrapped up like a little burrito. So they'll come out wrapped up like a little burrito. They do have their stinger right at the base of their tail, and that'll be covered in almost like a mucus covering just to protect it while it's being birthed. So they'll be born, and there can be multiple in that litter, up to 15 or 20, depending on the species. I think we've got a picture too of a much younger stingray that's pretty cool to see. We'll see if we can pull that one up. Yeah, so here you can see these are like newborn, maybe even a little bit premature babies that you can see. It looks like they are still connected to like a yolk sac of some sort. So skates, though, which are relative, skates are born out of eggs. So we kind of see that difference again with different types of, flat sharks. So we have stingrays that are born alive and skates that are born from their egg. So we'll go ahead and head back to Shark Lagoon then so we can take one last look at our Shark Lagoon exhibit. We've gotten a chance today to explore lots of the diversity within the shark world. So we've gotten to look at different types of sharks, how these different types of sharks survive, what different types of adaptations they have, and then also the work that the Aquarium of the Pacific is doing to help sharks and stingrays. So you can see here's one of our zebra sharks here. And this work is really important because sharks are a top predator, so they're important in their habitat, and the ability for zoos and aquariums to all work together to learn about shark reproduction can have a big impact on the sharks that live here at our aquariums. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope that you learned a lot about baby sharks and about shark diversity. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us here and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But again, thank you for joining us. We will be back here on Friday with another episode. So join us on Friday at 9 a.m. for another episode of Aquarium Online Academy. Thank you. Have a great day.